Hey, Inspired Tribe. How's it going? Welcome to the Inspired Livestream here on the Inspired channel. My name is Jean Nolan. It's my wonderful, beautiful wife, Kristin Nolan. And we are very excited that you're here. It is Monday, August 2nd. Can you believe it? It's already August 2nd, 2021, WON. And we are healthy, wealthy, whole, and free, Inspired Tribe. Really beautiful that you're here. Let me say hello to everyone. Just say hello in the live chat as you tune in. I've seen a few comments earlier by Black Sky. Can't see them right now. But please say hello in the live chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Agnieszka is tuning in. Good to see you. Young Buddha Anthony is tuning in. Good to see you. Agnieszka, I know, is tuning in. She hasn't told us if she's tuning in from Monte Carlo.
No,
I assume. Then Sandra tuning in from South Carolina. Welcome. We're going to go on a beautiful journey today. And this time, the journey is going to lead us into the future, to the year 2050. And we're going to look into our future, a beautiful story. Let me see who else is here. Stuart is here. And is it Joffrey? I assume. I hope I didn't butcher that. Sonia is here. Steve is here. Welcome. Ryzen Ability is here from Washington State on the West Coast. Good to see you. Wonderful. Then Joe Nozek aus Deutschland is tuned in. Welcome. We're just going to wait for people to jump on before we go into today's story. Let us tell you a little bit about what we did over the weekend. We had our third weekend in the ICA Inspired Coaching Academy that Kristin and I are teaching. A group of wonderful women to become coaches this year. And this was the third weekend together. We dove very deep into some amazing topics this weekend and had a big expansion journey. And our coaches, our junior coaches, are always looking for practice clients. I'm going to dive into this a little bit after today's live stream and the topic. So as everyone is tuning in, welcome everyone. Thank you for introducing yourself in the live chat. It's wonderful that you're here. And today's topic, as I said, is the year 2050, life after the Matrix. And I want to invite you to go on this journey with me. So it's the year 2050. And there's a beautiful scene of an elderly man just coming back from his morning walk. He's walked his property, his beautiful land that he has built with his family, beautiful bushes that he greeted in the morning. He looked at all the trees he planted with his family and all the gardens they raised together. And as he does every morning, he came to greet his land. He came to say thanks and just rejoice in the beautiful nature that surrounds him. And he sits down on his porch as he always does and just admires the view when his granddaughter River comes around. And River is a 10-year-old girl, a beautiful soul that enjoys nothing more than talking to her grandparents about the past, about the present, the future, and all of her ideas and all of her questions that she has. And so she greets her grandfather, as she always does, and sits on his lap and says, "Grandfather, I'm wishing you a beautiful morning. It's so good to be with you." And Grandfather Jack says, "Granddaughter, it's a pleasure to see you this morning. What brings you here?" And as they talk, River, the granddaughter, tells him that her mother had taken her to town just a few days ago. A town that's not too far away, quite a big city by our today's standards. And she said that they went to admire all the new artwork that was put on the buildings, and that beautiful artists from all across the nation had come to create beautiful art on the buildings and sceneries of beautiful landscapes, nature, flowers, and trees all across the buildings in the city. And she said that she had loved it so much, but there were questions that came up for her. She said, "Grandfather, why did they build the cities like that? Why did they put so many concrete buildings there and so little space for nature? Why did they not leave more space for trees and parks and bushes and flowers?" And she said, "Why was it so different then than it is now?" And she said, "Grandfather, can you tell me about the old times?" And the grandfather said, "Well, what would you like to know?" And she said, "Well, I tried to understand why they built the cities like that, but I couldn't come up with an image in my mind. I couldn't understand why people would do that. Wouldn't they rather have much more nature and space and water and trees and bushes and fruits and gardens and animals around them? What was so different that made people do such stupid things?" And the grandfather said, "Okay, I will tell you about the old times, and I will tell you about what happened." And she sat down next to him with big eyes and open ears, was very curious about what was to come. And her grandfather said, "There was a very different time on this planet many years ago. Life was very different for most people. They were very busy all the time, and they were running around, and they couldn't find real happiness. So they were running around and they were building things, and they were coming up with higher buildings, and they were coming up with taller houses, and they were coming up with newer and new things, but they couldn't find happiness." And she said, "Why is that, grandfather? I don't understand." And he said, "Well, the people at that time, they have forgotten about the ways of how to live. They had forgotten about the ways of happiness, the ways of nature. They weren't taught that way. As a matter of fact," he said, "they became so unhappy that they all had to take pills all the time, and they all were drinking alcohol all the time to feel something. It was a very, very difficult time for many people on Earth. All day long, they were doing things they didn't enjoy, most of them. And they did all of that to earn a lot of money." And she said, "But why would they do that? Why would they need so much money?" And he said, "Well, they needed to buy food, and they needed to pay for their houses, and they needed to pay for the stuff." And River, the granddaughter, looked at him and said, "They needed to buy food? But didn't they grow food? Didn't they have food in their gardens and on their lands? Didn't they have gardens back then?" And the grandfather said, "They had gardens, but so many people had forgotten about it, and they just had trees that didn't bear fruit, and they had lawns, but they didn't grow anything. They didn't have fruit trees, and they didn't have vegetable gardens. They just didn't know about that." And it was a time when people had forgotten about the ways on how to live on this planet so much that they began to rely more and more on technology. And she said, "Do you mean like computers and all those things?" "Yeah," he said, "exactly. But people didn't just use those things. They relied on those things. They trusted those things more than they trusted each other. And they were fighting each other all the time." And she said, "Grandfather, why were they fighting all the time?" He said, "Well, because they had forgotten so many things that they believed there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough for everyone. There wasn't enough space. There wasn't enough water. There wasn't enough food. And so they constantly fought each other. Not just nations, but also neighbors were fighting each other, and friends and family were fighting each other. They tried to get more and more and more so they would have enough." And the granddaughter looked at him and she said, "I just don't understand. Was the earth smaller then? Was the planet smaller? Was there less space?" He said, "No. But people forgot. They forgot about how to look after themselves. They forgot about freedom." And she said, "But what happened then? If it was such a bad time, what happened? What had changed?" And he said, "Well, even though people were unhappy, and even though they lived a life they didn't really like, deep inside of them, when they went to bed at night and when they woke up in the morning, they felt something. They felt a little spark. They felt something that would keep them going and something that told them there must be something more. And then something very unusual happened, something that changed the course of everything. Because at that time, most people believed that the world was coming to an end, that everything was going to fall apart and there were going to be many wars and much destruction. But then the wisdom keepers came, and it was very strange, because all of a sudden, there were people all across the planet that were teaching things, that were speaking to the people, that were writing books, and that brought about a wisdom and talked about a wisdom that all people had forgotten. But what was so strange is that it appeared as if those people had always been there. It's just that no one had listened before. But because people were so unhappy and because people couldn't find a better way anymore, they decided to give it a try and listen to those people. And the wisdom keepers, they talked about the true ways of living. They talked about what it really means to be a human being. And they talked about why humans are on the earth. And they began to bring a feeling of love and friendship and kindness and freedom to the people. And the people couldn't stop listening. It felt so good and it felt so real that they just couldn't stop listening. And the wisdom keepers, they were everywhere. And they weren't known in the world. They weren't famous. They weren't celebrities. They were just people that spoke in the villages and spoke amongst the families and spoke truth. And little after little, strange things began to happen. At first, no one really understood what was going on. But for some reason, every day, a little after a little, people felt a little better. They would walk outside more and in their neighborhoods and in their villages. And even though they had lived on the same street, in the same neighborhoods for a long time, all of a sudden they began to talk to their neighbors, get to know them. They began to spend more time outside and tend to their gardens more. They began to have new ideas. And at that time, people had still believed that governments needed to fix all the problems. They were taught that way. They were brought up that way. But because of the help of the wisdom keepers and because of the new feelings they felt inside, they began to take matters into their own hand. And as they had gotten to know their neighbors better and spoke to their families more and spent more time outside in nature, they began to see that there's more that united them than divided them. And they began to fight less amongst each other and be kinder to each other. And they began to wonder what all there was that united them more. And so they spoke more to each other. And neighbors began to make plans together. They began to plant trees together and they began to create gardens together. It was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful time. And the world didn't really understand what was happening, especially the leaders in government, because something unusual, something out of the ordinary was taking place. They couldn't understand it. It was nothing they had ever seen before. And as the months went by and the years went by, the people began to change their ways and change their ideas. And the wisdom keepers stuck around. They helped the people. They reminded them, they showed them, they gave them ideas, but they never took over. They never wanted to be leaders. They wanted the people to lead themselves. And they said that the people had it all within them. That the people knew how to take care of themselves. They just had to remember. That the people knew how to live in freedom. They just had to remember. And so one village after the other, and one county after the other, and one town after the other, and one nation after the other began to make changes. Because the changes were coming from the people, not from the governments. The governments couldn't help but change their ways too. And so it began that in many nations across the world, new constitutions were written and new laws were written and old laws were dissolved and put away with. And one of the most important things that the peoples of the earth did is to take back, not with force, not with violence, but with those new ideas. They took back their land, they took back nature, and they wanted to create something beautiful. The people understood that even though they had a lot of money, they didn't have real freedom, and that they would only be free when they could really take care of themselves and be responsible not just for their bodies, but for their well-being, for their souls, for their happiness. River, the granddaughter with her big eyes and open ears, couldn't stop listening. She was trying to imagine how that time might have been, as the grandfather continued. And he said, the nations began to talk and work with the peoples. And the people said that it was not fair nor logical that every living being had a place to live. But the human beings, they didn't have a place to live. All of them had to work hard and earn money to buy places or to rent places. And they said that it was time that every family had a piece of land they could live on. And so they began to make plans. And at first, the governments of the nations didn't really go along with that idea. They thought it was too different, too contrary to what had been going on for so long. And so the people again took matters into their own hands. And because these ideas and this beautiful feeling that the people had and the new vision that they had, it wasn't just one kind of people, it was amongst all people, the poorer, the richer ones, everyone became very, very interested in this idea. And so it came about that a lot of rich people who owned land decided to give some of it away. They decided to give some of it away so new settlements could be built and new villages could be built. But these weren't people that came in and built the houses. These were families, men and women and their children and their parents and their grandparents. And they had a common dream. They wanted to build a beautiful garden and they wanted to build a house that could house them all, and a garden and land that could nourish them and feed them. And they also decided to take the matters of schooling and learning and education into their own hands. And the wisdom keepers, again, they helped them. Because where the new villages came about, and they built them really fast, it didn't take so long. Every family had a piece of land, and they had planned it so that in the middle of all these pieces of lands, there would be a common ground where the villagers could meet, where markets would be every week, where the food was sold to people who didn't yet grow their own food, and where people would speak and learn. And there were schools for children and also schools for the parents and the adults, because they wanted to learn from the wisdom keepers as well, so they could teach their children better. And River said, well, it is still that way, grandfather. We still have those schools for adults. And the grandfather said, yes, indeed, we still have that. Because all people need to learn. All people need to understand again. And in these schools, things were very different than they used to be. There wasn't one teacher. There were teachers that came and traveled, and the wisdom keepers came. And the indigenous people, the people that had been here the longest, they came to those schools as well, and they taught their wisdom as well. And slowly but surely, everyone began to put their wisdom and their knowledge and their experience together. And so it became that a new culture began to form. It happened very quickly, because something that people did not understand before is when the human spirit awakens. And he looked at his little granddaughter, who was pure and so filled with the human spirit. He said, when that is awakened, then time does not matter anymore. It isn't the same anymore. A lot of things can happen in a shorter period of time. Before, people used to struggle for long periods of time. They used to work really, really hard before they could see anything, any results. But because this inspiration, this new idea came about, things began to change very, very fast. And as River looked around and remembered her day in the city, she said, so what did people want to do with those cities and all those buildings? Why did they need so many buildings? And the grandfather said, at that time, when those cities were built and the buildings were built and all the streets and all the roads, everything was just built so people could make more money. And he said, but again, grandfather, I don't understand why they needed all the money. And he said, well, before, we had a system where everybody owed money to somebody and everybody was indebted to someone. And she said, what does that mean? It means that you had to borrow something and then you had to pay it back, and you had to pay more back than you borrowed. We don't have that anymore, but this used to be something everyone needed to do. And she said, I'm so happy we don't have that anymore. That doesn't sound fun. And he said, no, it wasn't fun, but we changed it. People changed it. People changed it. It wasn't the governments. But the governments became better too, because when the people become better and when the families become stronger, then the governments become better and stronger too. And so it began that the nations didn't talk so much about war anymore, didn't talk so much about conflict anymore, but the leaders of the nation decided to listen to their people more. And what the people wanted was good food, and what they wanted was clean water, and what they wanted was clean air, and what they wanted was friendship. And so instead of just making laws, they listened to the people. And the laws weren't as important anymore as the vision that they created together. And the visions that the nation created together were created by the people, not by the leaders. The leaders were just the ones who presented the vision of their nation to the leader of another nation. It became a different thing. And one thing that all the leaders began to understand is that when they listened to their people and when they supported the will of the people, there would be peace. Not just peace in their nation, but peace amongst all nations. And that's what you're seeing now, he said to his granddaughter. There's peace. There's very little fighting going on in the world, and it's becoming better by the day. And most nations today have stopped putting harmful things in their food. As a matter of fact, most people, most families are growing their own food, and they have clean water on their own land. And so many rivers, because of the new ways, have began to be a good source of clean water for the people. In the old days, I could not go to a river and drink out of it. Today, there's many rivers I can drink out of again. For a while, there was silence, and the grandfather had tears in his eyes. And his granddaughter, she understood that it was just a time to be quiet together. She was fascinated by the story, and she had so many more questions. But she knew that more stories were to come. That's how her grandfather always is. He will tell her a story and let her think about it. And then he will tell another story. As they sat together, a thought of the grandfather's horses came to River's mind, and so she decided to go and visit with the horses and spend some time with them, which made her very happy. And the grandfather watched a little girl walk across the land to the meadow where the horses are and just rejoiced. And these memories, these old memories of a very different past, they made him very emotional. And they made him so appreciative of all the things that had happened in between, and that he was a part of it and got to be a part of it, got to be a part of that change. And there were many things he didn't say to his granddaughter because he didn't want to upset her. Because there were many things that happened that she just isn't ready to hear. And perhaps it will not even be necessary for her to hear those things. The year 2050, he thought to himself, is a very, very good year. Many beautiful things have happened. And as he always said to himself, He said it out loud, and the best is yet to come. It's a story from our future, just a short glimpse into the good things that are to come and the power that our visions have and hold. And that all of our quest for truth and all of our quest for seeing the things that have gone and are still going wrong should be an inspiration to us to create a vision and a future that is beautiful and nourishing and clean and happy and healthy. Because our granddaughters and our great-grandsons and the children to come, they're going to thank us. And they're going to love living in a place like that. And we are the generation who get to create this, who get to do this together, who get to be the creators of the future for life after the Matrix. It's time, isn't it? It's really time. Let me see who tuned in today. And welcome everyone I haven't welcomed yet. Hey Gary, good to see you. And Jovan, and Nicola, and Michael, Angie, Emma, Barb, Arham. Welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in with us. Can you imagine this future? I've seen it many times in my dreams, in my visions, on my walks, during our conversations, scripted it, sang about it. It's a beautiful future. And we truly get to create it now. Even if it doesn't feel like it, and even if we sometimes feel like it's not showing yet, but we create it in our minds and in our hearts first, and then it begins to manifest. It begins to show up in every little flower you plant, and every little tree you touch, and every little thought of appreciation you send out to the beautiful birds that sing the morning song, and every prayer of thanks you send out to the Creator. All of this creates the new future. All of this creates the year 2050. And we all have this power, and this is so important to know and remember. That we were all given that, and we were all given this purpose. And that we can do this. We can truly do this. And I would love at this point to encourage you all, I have done many times, to look up in the description of this video the beautiful Anastasia books that speak so much about a beautiful future, and not just a plan, not just a vision, not just an idea, but a tangible, real, beautiful, authentic plan on how to do it. How you can begin creating that future, and how this is not a religion, and this is not a cult, and this is not a any kind of ism. None of that. It is just a vision of a future that is pure again, that is worthy of creating for our children, and worthy of us living in. And we get to do that. It's a series of 10 books that have inspired us over the years so many times, and we're not affiliated with the author or the publishing company or anything. We're just inspired to share these ideas and visions. And so the Ringing Cedar books, the Anastasia books, down in the description. I know these days they're kind of hard to find, but if you look around the platforms, eBay and whatnot, I'm sure you'll find used copies or whatnot. Connect with each other, talk about this. This is such a beautiful journey. And if you feel today that for some reason there is little hope or no hope, then know that there's even so much more than just hope. There's millions and millions of people across the planet who have already put their energy into a new future, who are already committed to creating this, who are already in this and And if you feel that spark within you, then just join those people, not by signing up for a new group or by becoming a member of a new organization necessarily, just by beginning to live in more harmonious ways again, first within you, in your mind, in your heart, in meditation. But do go out, speak with your friends, your neighbors, your family, find common ground. You'll see how there's a spark within all of us that pretty much wants the same. We're just very, very, led away from how to do it. But these ways are coming back, and the wisdom keepers from the story, they're real. They're out there. They're everywhere now. They're coming out and they're speaking, and they're not cult figures, and they're not celebrities to be worshipped, and they don't want to be worshipped, and they don't want to be gurus or put on a pedestal. That's not their goal. They just want to remind people of who they really are and remind us of our true power. And they're coming out. They're coming about everywhere. They're coming in all ages, in all sizes, in all, and men and women, and in all colors and races and ethnicities. And there's no boundary to that. But they are all over the place. And sometimes they're in the most unusual of places. So it's a beautiful life we get to create together, and a beautiful vision we get to create together. Thank you for joining us today, Inspired Tribe. We put our link tree in the top of the live chat section where you can find all things Inspired. We're currently transferring all our videos also over to Rumble. Please subscribe there as well on our Rumble channel. And we have a second YouTube channel. And just find your way through the Inspired Tribe links. A beautiful way to connect and talk to each other is the Inspired Tribe Telegram chat. It's also in the link tree. And maybe you'll discover that you live very close to each other in the same region, and you want to get together, maybe over coffee, or you have, some of our tribe members are great visionaries already, and some are becoming great visionaries, and some are allowing themselves to become visionaries. Talk to each other. There's wonderful ideas and synergy, and it was always meant to be this way, to connect. And last but not least, an invitation from Kristin and I. We wanted to do something like this last year, but last year really didn't allow for this. It would have been very difficult to do it. But this year, we're going to have a beautiful retreat, the Yado retreat, the You Are the One retreat, for a beautiful shift in energy, 4 days, 3.5 days, from September 30th to October 3rd. Down in Florida, Cape San Blas, Florida. That link is also in the link tree. If you feel inspired to join us, we already have a wonderful group of people, and we're slowly but surely coming to the max of the group size. There's a few spots left because we want to keep the group small, to have a beautiful, intimate experience together, and to really shift the energy. And it's all part of this great journey that we're in. And I know there are hard days. There are days where it's hard to find vision, and hard to find clarity, and hard to find appreciation, and even inspiration. Some days hope is enough. And so if you feel that way one day, save this live stream, come back to it, listen to the story. It's a true story. It's a true story. We didn't make it up. It's a true story. Inspired Tribe, thank you for being with us. We love you. You're in our hearts. And we'll be here again tomorrow, 2 p.m. Central, right here on the Inspire channel. We love you.